All right, all right. Welcome everybody to Clear Vision Wednesday. I'm Claudia Muehlenweg. I'm the creator of the Natural Clear Vision Method. And if you're interested in vision improvement, make sure to subscribe to this channel because every week we go live here and every week we have amazing guests or myself teaching valuable skills or talking or educating you about anything that affects your vision. And today I'm super excited about my guest today, and I'm going to bring her on stage. Dr. Ainhoa Federico, hi.
Hello, so nice to be back around here in your YouTube channel and with your community. Thank you for the invitation, Claudia.
Yeah, so we have a topic, that you'd also teach, obviously. So I didn't do a good job introducing you. So you are a natural vision improvement teacher. You're also a professor at the university in Toulouse. And I think, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? Because you're probably doing a much better job than I do.
Okay, well, as you said, I am a researcher and professor at the University of Toulouse. I have been actually teaching natural vision improvement at the university for a number of years now. First, it started in the what they would call the Free University of Toulouse, where researchers and teachers share their research fields with society. And usually it's people who are retired who participate. So usually they're beyond 60, 70, 80, etc. And so that's where I first started teaching at the university. This service, again, showcases what researchers are doing. And it was interesting to see that my classes would always have to double, and there was always a waiting list to participate in them. So colleagues started noticing, and I was invited to join another colleague to transform an existing master that was going to disappear because the person who had created it went retired as well. And so this other colleague and me created a new master's on health education, including some topics on natural vision improvement. So that's what's been going on at the University of Toulouse. If we continue in the university side, I have recently been nominated. I have been, how do you call that? Well, they've given me a honorary doctorate in a Mexican university last March. And also with this same Mexican university, we are creating the first university diploma for vision coaches. So it's under approval for the Mexican, the equivalent of the Secretary of Education or the Ministry of Education in Mexico. And so we'll see, but it looks like it could be happening very soon. So those are super good news. And on the other side, on the side of not just research and teaching at the university, but also like sharing this information and this knowledge like you do, for example, with your YouTube channel and through your newsletters and in your community, in Spanish particularly. Since the year 2016, I started teaching online about natural vision improvement. And since then, it's been 16 million people watching the videos in my YouTube channel, 8 million visiting pages in my website, 4 million going through my free training in 200 countries, like I don't know how many more there are in the planet, so that's about it. And yeah, thousands of students of the advanced program. So thanks to the tools, the online tools, like you also do amazingly well in English, I'm also sharing about natural vision improvement broadly. I consider that these online tools nowadays are a revolution for diffusing useful information. Like in prior centuries, it was inventing the print. So we have an opportunity to educate. That's wonderful. Was that kind?
Yeah, that was amazing. And our topic today is better vision through reading, which is the name of a program that you have. And I really like the name of that program because for most people, reading becomes a problem. And I know you overcame your own vision challenges. We don't want to go. I think you shared that story on a previous episode. But just like me, right? You had several vision problems several times in your life.
Yes.
And so, we don't just want to talk about presbyopia today, because I think reading is such an important skill. And even if you're nearsighted, have astigmatism or other vision challenges, fusion problems, right? Reading is usually a thing that people often have to give up because it's, becoming too blurry, or they wear strong glasses. And so there's actually a way to improve your vision through reading. But let's backtrack a little bit. So what do you think is the main reason that people, I do want to talk a little bit about presbyopia, which is the old age side, right? When people get reading glasses in their 40s or 50s, and as they often notice, their vision declines really fast. What do you think is the root cause of presbyopia?
So, okay, so on the one hand, it's interesting we're talking about this because, as I mentioned, I started teaching within the context of the university. The first space was basically for retired people. So people were very interested. They were already attending this Free University of Toulouse classes, and they noticed there was something to improve eyesight. And of course, they were interested. Some people had been wearing glasses for decades already, and some were not just having presbyopia, but also starting to have other issues like cataracts or macular degeneration or others. And so they were very, very happy. So it's interesting also to notice that, and we've had plenty of success with these populations, and you have also, of course. A lot of the people who are interested in natural vision improvement, some of them have had issues all their lives, but some actually become interested after their 40s, 50s, when presbyopia starts to say hi and the need for reading glasses. But one thing that is interesting around presbyopia is that 30 years ago, the standard time to have presbyopia appear was after your 50s, in your 50s. And nowadays, it's more in the 40s. So that gives us also some hint that maybe there isn't just a biological determination around presbyopia appearing, but rather that we have changed something in our way of life in the last 30 years that make it so that we have lost a decade of good eyesight, statistically speaking, right? Another thing that is very interesting also is that while presbyopia is very common for almost everyone in our societies, well, you live in the States, but you're from Germany, I gravitate between Spain, France, Mexico, the States, depending on different moments of my life. In all these societies, and I don't know where the people are watching, it's very common that most people will have presbyopia after their 40s or their 50s. But in anthropological research, there are specific cases of whole societies where presbyopia is very rare or almost non-existent. 30 to 40 years ago in continental China, there was very little presbyopia. Nowadays, problems with the vision have increased a lot in Asia. It's actually one of the regions of the planet where vision problems have accelerated more. But we can find other examples like the Hansa in the Himalayas, or the Vilacabamba in Ecuador, or even the Moken that are in the archipel of islands around Andaman. So in these ethnic groups, in these societies, there's very little to no presbyopia. And actually, even if we come back to our way of living and around here, wherever it is that you live, look around you and maybe you know someone or you remember someone who, being very aged, can still put the thread in the needle, or can still read the prescriptions, like read the ingredients in the labels, or can read the very small print of the medicines, like the instructions that come with medicines. Every time I ask this question to my students, they remember a grandmother or an aunt or someone. And among the very known people, you probably are aware of maybe Paul McCartney or maybe the Pope, right? Not the current Pope, but John Paul II. And he died very old. Can you find one single picture where you would see him wearing glasses? No, you will not find that John Paul II wore glasses. Or Paul McCartney, he'll wear sunglasses for fashion now and then, but he doesn't need glasses to read. And now he was young in the 60s, but he's not anymore now. So how come that there's whole societies or specific people that, being very aged or being older, can still see very, very well near? So if there are such cases, then we need to be interested in what they do or how they live. And what are we doing different that, or I mean, I'm saying in plural, but I see very well also. But what are people who get vision problems in their 40s or their 50s doing different from these people who continue to see very well? So this is the first thing that is very important to understand, that it's not a biological determination that everyone has to have vision problems and need reading glasses and get presbyopia with age. It's common, yes. Statistically frequent, yes, but it's not compulsory. This is important because it allows us to shift mindsets and say, okay, so it's not a fatality, then maybe there's something I can do about it. And can I show the little?
Yeah, of course. I have one.
Yeah, I'm seeing it just behind you. So, of course, there's different muscles that play different parts in focusing, so that we can focus at different distances, and they're involved in different ways also when symptoms appear. When there's myopia or hyperopia or astigmatism, it's different groups of muscles that are involved in causing those refractive errors. For presbyopia, what is most commonly understood is that the problem lies with the crystalline and the ciliary muscles. Yeah. So in the model, this is the cornea, lights go through it, and then we have the iris and the pupil, and lights goes through the little hole. Depending if there's a lot of sun or less sun, the pupil or light or more light or less light, the pupil will change shapes. And then we have the crystalline, which is a natural lens. You, of course, know this very well, of course. And this crystalline, the cornea is also a lens that has 38 to 42 diopters approx. And so it bends the angle of light so that it will project in the retina, in the projector, where it will be transformed into, the light impulses will be transformed into nervous impulses so that the brain can interpret what we're seeing. But we also have this other lens, the crystalline. And what is very interesting and specific about this one is that it has the capacity to change shapes. Yeah, when the ciliary muscles get tense and they press, the crystalline will bulge up and it becomes like a magnifying lens, and then we can see near. And when we're looking far, the ciliary muscles, they relax, the crystalline becomes flat, and then we can see far away. Okay, and then we have the vitreous humor, like a gel, a jelly, a transparent jelly. And then we have the retina, where those light impulses are projected. Yeah. Now, I often say, and I'm deviating a little bit, but I'll come back to the main thing. I often say that the focusing mechanisms in the eye can be compared to when we want to project an image to a wall or a screen. If we want it to be very clear, we can do two things. We can put the projector further away or closer to the wall. And then we have the little wheel with the lens to make it sharp. Yeah. So the external muscles, the oblique, the straight, can play with the shape of the eyeball to make this further or closer that we would do with the projector. And that participates in focusing. And just 1 millimeter of difference of the shape of the eyeball is 3 diopters of difference, right? But then we have the little wheel, right? In the projector, the little wheel would be the crystalline with the ciliary muscles. So what happens with presbyopia? They tell us that this mechanism or this lens becomes more rigid. That's what they say. Now, what's interesting to know is that, well, two facts. One, the ciliary muscles are 400 times stronger than what is needed to bend this lens. The muscles in the eye are in general 400 times stronger than what is needed to change the shapes of the eye and do what they need to do for focusing. So it's not necessarily lack of strength of the muscle or potential strength, but it tends to become routine, mental routine. The brain is giving the same signals to push as little or as much as quote, quote, usual. And then if the lens is becoming more rigid or more dense, and the muscles are doing the same strength, well, maybe it's not as easy to bend it. But if we would send another signal, then they would push harder and the lens would bend and we could still read near. So the first problem that we can find here is a problem of routine or even boredom. When we're doing the same things the same way all the time, without changes, without stimulation, without variation, it's more likely that we end up having presbyopia. But if we multiply changing stimuli, diversifying stimuli, playing, exploring, doing other things that are unusual, looking at the world in unusual ways, looking with the right eye and the left eye, and then both together, and then looking far and near, and looking, paying attention at the periphery, looking at the mirror, looking upside down. If we're multiplying the variations of stimulation, then the muscles have to do different things. The brain has to do different things. There is no routine. And so the brain is used to changing the amount of strength it tells the muscles to do, so it can work better with the crystalline. But there's a second property, and that's that the quality of the tissues and the cells in the crystalline are different if we don't use it much or if we use it more. Actually, the crystalline tends to stay flexible and transparent the more we use it, the more we change distances. So we have both mechanisms combined. So the more we're looking far and near and far and near and far and near, and having the crystalline like bulge up and become flat and bulge up and become flat, it actually protects the health of the crystalline itself, and that remains flexible and transparent. So actually playing with balls, for example, and making sure that you're looking at different distances at different times will postpone or prevent presbyopia, but also, if we go further, cataracts. Because the next step with the crystalline, the tissues and the cells degrading in their quality of transparency and flexibility after presbyopia, it's cataracts. So, so this is something that we need to see. What happens with the people that see very well, even when they're very old? Usually, they're diversifying the way in which they look at the world and how they use their eyes. And in the case of Pope Jean Paul II and John Paul II and Paul McCartney, two Pauls actually, so they both learned natural vision improvement in different ways when they were young. Paul McCartney learned the visual yoga when he was in India, the famous Beatles trip to India, and John Paul II learned natural vision improvement from a Polish doctor when he was young, and well, they kept motivated to practice, and so they kept very good eyesight. And with these ethnic groups that we're talking about, when we look into their lifestyle, they spend a lot more time outdoors, and outdoors there's always more opportunities to look far and to be interested about things that are happening far away. If we look again more close to us in time and space, maybe you are aware, or maybe not, but after 20, not you, Claudia, but in general, people, I know you are. So we know that at the end of 2019, the World Health Organization created a report on the state of vision in the world. And at that time, the report states that 1/3 of the world population has vision problems. 80% of them are preventable or curable. So, hey, natural vision teachers, coaches, educators, we have work here to do, because most of them are actually preventable or curable. And at that time, it was expected that by the year 2050, half of the world population would have vision problems, so that the things would accelerate and continue in a bad tendency. Now, after the end of 2019, a few months later, what happened? Well, March 2020 happened, and besides the 100th anniversary of research on natural vision improvement and Dr. Bates, etc., well, everybody's aware that there was COVID and there were lockdowns everywhere in the world, or in most places. Just in June 2020, so 3 months later, there were many publications in scientific journals and the press announcing how just with 3 months of lockdowns, vision problems had accelerated. In Spain, it was 55% of the general population and 77% of teenagers. huge. And we were not confined just for 3 months, right? I mean, of course, this depended a lot between countries, but in some places, there's been 2 years or more of having completely transformed our lifestyle, and we're just barely like getting back to old habits of being more outdoors, etc. So even in 2020, and we're 3 years later, the projections changed, and now the expectation is that by the year 2030, half of the world population will have vision problems. So this, again, it's not genetic, it's not biologically determined, it's how has our lifestyles changed, our lifestyle changed in these past few years. And actually, we can see the future when we look to Asia. In Asia, depending on the countries and depending on the cities, of course, there's variations, but there are many places where 80 to 95% or more of the population have vision problems. And again, this is not genetic. 1 generation ago, they were at 50%. So what are they doing? What are we doing with our eyesight in our daily life, with our habits that is causing vision problems? And when we talk about that, well, we can revert it. Let's not do what creates the damage and do what keeps eyesight functioning well. And we can prevent presbyopia this way. I remember that we recorded a session talking about this, and because we're doing this live, and we also did it, we improvised at that time. So I don't know if we're actually talking about the same things or it's going to go into a different direction a little bit.
But I mean, whatever you feel is the most important. I don't remember exactly what I asked you because I always come up. But first of all, that was really fascinating. We have some questions on YouTube. We will get to those. That was really interesting. What you talked about, the habits, the routine, what you do with your eyes, the interest, all those things. I personally found, and I think you're relating to that too, that people who have a vision for their life, who get excited to get up every day, who are more curious about everything and, open-minded, have low rates of presbyopia or no presbyopia versus those that have a job, they're counting down the days to retirement, which kind of ties into your routine. And I also, you talk a little bit that you're trained in the Martin Brofman methodology, and you talk a little bit about the personality. I want to get to that next. Before we look at the questions about how to apply small print and the reading, we will get to the reading part, but I do want to really cover that a little bit because I feel there is a huge impact on that. So share with us a little bit more. What is the personality of somebody other than the routines and all that things that kind of can lead to presbyopia?
Yeah, I also wanted to go that direction because I vaguely remember that we talked about it a little bit. So I had the good fortune to be acquainted with Dr. Martin Brofman's method, and then to meet him personally, and then to collaborate for 7 years with him, translating all the workshops and all the trainings that he did in Spain. And so I became very familiar with his hypotheses, with his theories, with his method of work. And I also took those hypotheses and put them into my own research at the University of Toulouse. And with another colleague, Anita Meidani, who's a sociologist specialized in sociology of the body and sociology of health, we have carried in several occasions research on this. And I think adding up the different surveys that we've set up, I think we've done questionnaires and interviews with over 1,500 people. So it's not a small sample. That's what I mean. It's not a small sample. And we've confirmed the thesis or the theories or the hypotheses from Martin Brofman. We have found them again. And so, but let's give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. He identified a very interesting profile of personality behind presbyopia that we have found again and again, and that maybe you can relate with maybe your clients and participants to your courses. We can use a metaphor. If this is my personal space, so what is from the length of my arm towards me is my own personal space, and what is outside of the length of my arms is the outer world. Okay, it's a metaphor, but maybe it can work. When we have presbyopia, some people call it the syndrome of having the arm too short, right? We need to push things away to see them clearly until our arms are not long enough, right? So in terms of energy, what are we doing? It's as if we're pushing our energy away from ourselves into the outer world. And when we observe the age at which presbyopia appears in the societies where it's common, compared to the societies where it's not common or when it wasn't common, what usually happens around the time when presbyopia appears is that the person is not valuing herself or himself anymore. The person feels that they have lost worth or value, or their life has lost interest. And so when they start feeling that way, they start looking into the past, and they consider that the best has already happened. They already had their profession and maybe now they're retired, or they already had kids, or they didn't have them, or they got married, or they didn't, or they divorced. But it's as if all the important stuff already happened before. And now it's not as interesting. I don't know in English what it would be, but in Spanish, these people even speak in a certain way. And they say, in my times, things would be this or that, right? And I always look at them with surprise, thinking, you're alive, so your time is also now. I mean, if you're alive, your time is now. Then it was also then, but it's also now. So people tend to look at the past with nostalgia, with guilt, or with anger. And sometimes regretting the things that they did or they didn't do, or the things that other people did to them, but their consciousness and their attention is in the past. And in the present, they feel like they don't have as many options. Like if they want to buy a house, they won't get a mortgage anymore or a loan because they're not young enough to do the payments, so they cannot change houses if they want, or maybe they cannot have kids anymore, or maybe they're retired and they cannot work anymore in the things that they would love to devote themselves to. And even because we live in very ageist societies, they look at themselves at the mirror and they start to see wrinkles and they don't feel as attractive. So, and then they look around them to young people and they're using technology like they were born with it, and they're having trouble to find what the process is. So it seems as if the best of their life happened before and they don't feel suited or useful anymore in the present. And what is different in those societies where there's no presbyopia? Well, I was very interested when I first learned about this research on how 30 years ago there was barely any presbyopia in China. Now things have changed, and if you look at how the Chinese society is, it's very infused with the philosophy of Confucianism, where family relationships are very important, but they also have a hierarchy. And older people are the most important people, and they're always regarded with respect and revered, and people go to them to ask for advice, and they always sit in the best place in the room, and they're always served first. They're very highly regarded. So it's almost like the opposite of what we just described. People who develop presbyopia tend to feel like, they don't matter all that much anymore. They're not important anymore. Their life is not so interesting anymore. So instead of giving the energy to themselves and feeling at the center of their own film, of their own life, like the protagonist in the driving, in the steering wheel of their own car, in their own vehicle, they start giving their energy to the new protagonists. And so they'll pay a lot of attention to taking care of their kids or their grandkids or their spouse or their parents or their neighbors, or maybe some social cause somewhere where they feel that it makes sense, but they're giving away their energy. That's why they see clear far, but they're not seeing clear near anymore. They don't devote enough time to their own needs. They don't give themselves enough attention. They don't take time for themselves to be at the center of their lives. And interestingly, people with presbyopia, they're often running for others, but they don't take time for themselves. They don't take time also to see. And so very often I tell people that want to make a mind shift, change the mindset around what they're doing with their life and their energy and their attention. And I tell them about two things. One, If the look has been on the past, but then we need to revert this. So we need to make sure to make the rest of your life the best of your life. So what can you think about? What can you invent? How can you make that the years that you still have in front of you are fascinating and fun and exciting? And okay, maybe you're not going to work anymore. Of course, this also depends between countries and retirement ages. There can be a lot of variation around there. But even if you retired, well, maybe now you finally have the opportunity to do all those activities that you couldn't when you were working or you were raising your kids. Well, but now it's time to do it. You always wanted to dance. Well, go and get some dancing lessons. You always wanted to paint. Well, buy yourself some materials and put a corner in your house where you can paint, or whatever it is. But devote time for the things that make you happy. And I would say even more so if they're useless to anybody else, because then you're stating that you're so worthy and so important that you deserve to take time for yourself for those things that their only reason for being is that you enjoy them, period. And of course, the activities themselves may be different for different people. For some, it may be dancing or painting or taking a saltwater bath with candles and incense. That is very nice, or going for a walk in the mountain, or having coffee with a friend, or reading a book, or going to the beach. It depends from one person to another, but what's core is that you need to do things just because you love them, period. Take time to make life fun and exciting and nice. And for that, so make the rest of your life the best of your life. And for that, sometimes you need to practice what I call positive selfishness. If you have been giving away your energy to everybody else, well, now you need to put all the direction of your energy towards you. So we'll need to exaggerate a little bit, but only to create balance, right? If you've developed presbyopia, you've been way too much paying attention at others. So now exaggerate in the other direction and you'll find balance after some time. So how does positive selfishness work? Well, first, me. After that, me. Then I can take care of me. And if there's something left, it's for me. So you need to really put yourself in the center and let other people handle their affairs. Maybe some of them will be great.
We can't hear you when you whisper.
Okay, sorry. So maybe some of them will actually be very happy and grateful and thankful, even if they don't tell you, that you let them do their thing. Maybe they
that was so fascinating. And I think you definitely, you definitely hit a nail. I think it's very much that, idea of, and my background is farsightedness, so there was always the tendency to not look at myself. I also didn't have good vision, so I didn't want to see. But yeah, that's very, very fascinating, and it kind of lines up with what I talked about, people that are counting down the days to retirement. So one of these activities, and I want to bridge the gap now to reading, because the better vision through reading idea that you are sharing is not just for presbyopia. Obviously, presbyopia is one of those things that we probably all love to do. When you're presbyopia, you love to read, and reading is also a form of self-care, because you're really doing it, right? Especially if you don't read nonfiction, fiction, you're really doing it for your own enrichment, right? Versus like learning something. But even if you learn something, a lot of people I know have retired, and now they're discovering another thing that they really want to learn and even go to university or college for. So reading is one of those things. And obviously there's other near vision activities. I think, but reading is one of those that most people feel the most frustrating. And it's like reading a menu in dim light, maybe you're starting to date again after divorce or whatever, or you go out with friends, or reading a book. So, we have some questions on YouTube. But before you get to that, there's a question about myopia. But let's talk a little bit about what is the approach to, apart from everything else that you shared. I love the me. I think for most people, that would be a hard one. Maybe the first step, me, and then the second step. and then you get to the point where I include myself. It's definitely challenging for me with daughters, and they need help. And anyway, so what are other things in terms of specifically for reading that people can do with presbyopia? Like, what's your approach? Let's say somebody already wears reading glasses or maybe bifocals or progressives. What do you recommend to do?
Okay, so and maybe we'll circle back to a few of these topics with the questions. So indeed, the Better Vision Through Reading program is not necessarily only for people who have presbyopia and want to see better, but actually for anybody who loves reading, to be able to read seeing better, so understanding better and with more focus and remembering better and having just a more enjoyable experience, while also taking care of their eyes and improving their eyesight. And actually, a lot in the program is not only during the moment of reading, but things that are happening around when you are reading, and how you can set yourself up for success. And for example, there is a whole level that is about the environment where you read. Is there enough light? Is there enough humidity? Is your posture correct? Or are you reading in a way that's creating a lot of tension or a lot of strain for your muscles in your neck? And that's then going to create more strain in all your body and probably more constraints also for your eyes. So the environment where we read plays a huge role, and we can optimize for those conditions. And then also what happens before you are reading. Why are you reading? Are you reading something that's interesting? Are you reading with pleasure? Are you obliging yourself to read every word, or are you looking for something particular? And how you set yourself up for reading also changes the experience. Of course, it's different if you're reading because you need to study, or you're reading a novel for pleasure. But still, why you read and how you prepare yourself to read plays an important role. And then while you are reading, there's also things that you could do that make the experience better for your eyesight. Of course, how you're holding your piece of paper or your book, what's distance, but also what's happening around. Are you now and then also looking far away? Are you remembering to blink? Are you reading the line itself, or above the line, or under the line? There's things that happen while you're reading that change also the experience, and that can be good for your eyes or bad for your eyes. And then sometimes you also take pauses while you read. So what happens during those pauses? And you can optimize how you use the pauses in the reading also to take care of your eyes. Like, you could go to the window, you could stretch, you could look far away, you could drink water. There's a number of things that that you can do also in those pauses. And then there's also in the program a number of practices that can be done with texts or books that also improve eyesight. You can put the text upside down, and you can play in different ways with them. And that's also helpful also for afterwards having a better visual acuity and reading better. And finally, there's also a section reflecting about tools around reading. For example, one of the tools is a pointer. We can use a pointer while we're reading. Maybe we were told in school that we shouldn't point at the text, but actually a lot of people who are interested in speed reading notice that when you use a pointer, you read much better and much faster, and you understand better. But also other tools that we sometimes use around eyes or eyesight, like filters. Should the filters be, if we're reading on a screen, should they be on the screen, or should the filters be on our eyes, right? Sometimes people use the blue light blockers. Or if we want to focus better, should we use reading glasses, or could we use pinhole glasses that can allow also for a sharp focus for reading, while they help the eyes get trained in good habits to seeing better? So I'm just giving a few ideas on the kinds of things that we talk about in the course. And I think they're helpful not just for people who have presbyopia and would like to see better, but in general for people who like reading and would like to have a better experience while reading, and also be taking care of their eyes and fostering better eyesight for themselves. Does that
can we
answer?
that? Yeah, that was great. Maybe you can give a few practical tips. So you talked about posture, you talked about reading the line or above or below. I would love to kind of have you talk a little bit about that. And then you talked about, now I lost my train of thought, something you just said at the end.
The
I forgot.
pinholes, the pointer.
Talk a little bit about glasses, but really, and then lastly, we want to talk about, there was also a question on YouTube. Dr. Bates talked a lot about reading small print in dim light, like in candlelight, right? So your approach sounds to be more like increase the brightness. The posture, I would always be interested in what posture you recommend. But yeah, maybe some of those, I know you have a whole program laid out that, is going into details, but just maybe some highlights.
Yeah.
Some takeaways, what you recommend. You recommend bright lighting, dim lighting, small, larger print, and those kind of things.
Okay, and I recall vaguely that we talked about a few of those also last time. So with the posture, actually, the best posture is not having one. Let me explain. The body is not made to be not moving. Now I'm not in my usual environment, and at my parents-in-law. So this is not my chair. This is not my working space. At home, I sit on a Pilates ball. Why? Because I can be moving all the time, and I can be bouncing up and down and forth. And so when the body is in movement, it balances itself a lot better. And also tension doesn't accumulate someplace. So I love these balls because I can be doing whatever it is I'm doing while I'm changing the position all the time. And I guess you have one. Okay, you have something like that. Okay.
Yeah, this is only on a standing desk, obviously, right? So,
yeah. Another kind of chair that I love are those chairs where you put your knees on them and they're kind of balancing. So I like that very much. But I also like to change positions and change postures for my work or my reading. So sometimes I'll be sitting, sometimes I'll be standing. Nowadays there's standing desks. You can change the height. Exactly. Sometimes I'll be sitting on the couch. Sometimes I'll be projecting what it is on the TV. So I'm also changing the distance at which I'm looking at whatever it is I'm reading. So sometimes it'll be near, sometimes it will be further away. So changing posture is a very good idea. Now, if you're going to be static or mostly static, at least make sure that your back is well sustained, that there is around a straight angle, like 90 degrees between your back and your legs and your knees, and your feet should have some support. The shoulders shouldn't they should be as far away from the ears as possible. So you also need to establish the proper height for your forearms. And actually, it's if you're going to bend your head, it's good to give it some support, or then you can have some how do you call that? Something to hold what you're reading.
Right, yeah.
How do you call those in English?
Yeah.
Atril in Spanish. Anyway, so because the idea is that you don't have to be like this, because then there's a lot of a strain for the neck. The head is a lot heavier, like 7 times heavier when it's bended like that. So all the muscles need to pull harder, and that can create other tension in other parts of your back, your shoulders, that create more constraint also for the eye muscles. So, and the idea is to have the thing at more or less the distance of an elbow, although I like to change the distance, not have all the time the same one. And ideally at the level of the eyes, or sometimes even better, a bit higher. And why that? Because when the head is going down, not only it has an effect on the muscle tensions, but it also has an effect on your emotions. Looking down is correlated with depression, and looking up is correlated with enthusiasm and joie de vivre. Actually, look at any sports person that wins the Olympic Games in something. What do? Yay! They look up, right? So when our reading posture is constantly looking down, we're closing our posture, and we're creating for our neurotransmitters information about we are depressed. We don't want to do that, yeah? There's a beautiful talk by Amy Cuddy, a TED Talk, and sorry, I don't recall now if she's a professor at Harvard or Stanford. It's one of the two. And she's talking about nonverbal communication, and posture is gestures, posture. That's what nonverbal communication is about. And your posture and gestures communicates a lot of things to the outer environment, but the most important thing is what you're communicating to yourself. because your brain is also taking clues and signs of how you're holding yourself to interpret how you feel. It works both ways. So if we're holding ourselves in a depressive position while we're reading, it's not going to be very good for us in the mid-long term as well. Yeah. And we were talking about how emotion affect eyesight. Well, there's different dimensions around it. What else can we do with posture? So we talked about, the height and light, I would say, is so important, having enough natural light in the atmosphere. Okay. And also maybe good light focusing on what you want to read. And not having, if you're going to do it on a computer or a tablet or something like that, not having reflections of light that are very disturbing for the eyes. So there go some of them. So Tricia found the TED Talk, the link to the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy. Yeah, good. I love that one. It's very, very, very good. Very useful.
So yeah, and so the other thing I would love to talk a little bit about is there's two things: speed reading, because sometimes I had got clients that did speed reading where they try to do see the whole paragraph clearly at once and don't move their eyes. That lead to, and the other one is the small print. So that was a question.
Yes.
In my personal, and I'm curious what you think, in my personal experience, having people with presbyopia do a lot of small print reading very close up at a blurry distance actually helps them relax, versus with myopia and nearsightedness, there tends to be more attention of now I'm trying to read it, making a big effort, and it actually doesn't help. So what is your take on small print? And it doesn't matter if somebody's far or nearsighted, what's your take on that?
So I'm going to answer combining several of the things that you're mentioning and also remembering what we talked about last time. And for me, in my experience, and again, with all the respect for Dr. Bates and Margaret Dars-Corbett, in my experience, it's very useful to change the conditions and to diversify the stimuli. So the same way that our nervous system and our endocrinal system functions much better when we're exposed to natural light, and we have the kind of the tonality of the light at the time of the day when it's happening with the real sun. And then at night, we need to be sleeping in a space that is as dark as possible, so that again, our nervous system and our eyes rest, and the enzymes that allow us to see and with contrast and colors can be generated again in the dark. All the contrasts are useful for eyesight. So if we want to have good eyesight, we'll want to pay attention at the details in our central vision while being aware of our periphery. It's useful to be aware of what the left eye and the right eye is seeing independently, and then also together, because it improves.
You mean like patching, or because there was a question about somebody? Yes. Okay. So reading, for how long would you recommend doing that?
Well, I usually recommend doing things as long as they feel nice and that they're fun, because then you're in contact with the input from your own body, and then it can tell you when it's tired or it's draining or it's bored, because the more you do things with enjoyment and presence, and the better it will be. What I do is that sometimes I go walking around the side, the block of houses. I go walking around the neighborhood. Around here, it's very beautiful. And so I will cover one eye. I like a tool from another colleague of ours. Maybe you've invited her, maybe even more than once, Irina Castle. She has this thing where you can swap the shields and block. It's very nice. Anyway, but you could use a Post-it, or you could use an iPad or your own hand. And so I walk around. I do one tour looking with one eye, and then the next tour I do it looking with the other eye, and I discover fascinating things when I look with one eye or the other, and then I do the tour again with both eyes, and then I allow myself to enjoy the 3D of things, and also be fascinated by the beauty in that way. But what I meant is, you want the contrast, like center and periphery, right and left. You want to look far and to look near, and you also want to stimulate your eyesight with a lot of light and also with little light. and to put your eyes in different conditions so that all the different muscles and all the different mechanisms are invited to function in different ways. Something that I encourage my students to do also is to take darkness baths. So, or darkness showers. So what would that be? It's actually doing your usual hygiene practice, whatever, taking a shower, taking a bath, but to do it in the dark. Usually bathrooms tend to be one of the rooms in the house that don't have necessarily a window. So it's easier to create easily a dark space there. Maybe you can, probably there's no windows, or if there is, you can close it, you close the doors. Maybe there's a little bit of light that goes under the door, like you don't have to create total darkness, but to have the room as dark as possible, and to take your shower or your bath or whatever it is that you do with as little light as possible. And as you're doing that, in those maybe 10-15 minutes, you'll notice that at the end you see a lot more than in the beginning, really a lot more, because the rods have had the time to be stimulated and the brain to pay attention at that. And actually we could go as far as 2 hours into little light, or quote, quote, darkness, and we would notice that we see more and more, but we don't usually give ourselves the time to notice. So taking a bath or a shower in those conditions, it's a safe space, you know where it is, you know where you're doing. You could even order your bottles of soap and conditioner and shampoo so that you don't put the wrong thing in the wrong place. But it's a moment that you can give yourself to experience seeing in the dark. And so for reading with small print or bigger print, with light or with little light, I would actually encourage doing all of the above. And to keep changing. So sometimes you are going to read a smaller print, and sometimes a bigger print, and sometimes with more light or with less light. But one thing
can I interrupt, check really quick? So first of all, 2 things. One person wanted to know if you read the line or below the line when you read text, and also when you read in lower light. Let's say you talked about like darker.
We'll talk about that.
When you relax, do you just not try to read, and even if it's blurry, do you just move your eyes along the text, or what do you recommend?
So, but what I was going to say just before is that changing conditions is very interesting, but in the present moment, look for the set of conditions that is not going to create strain. Because when we create strain at that moment, that's counterproductive. So in the moment, if you need to put the letter a little bit bigger or the light a little bit bigger or the opposite, go ahead in the moment. Now, for practicing vision improvement, you can, of course, on purpose, set a little bit more challenging conditions, but you're going to do it for a short period of time, and then you can do some palming and resting, and then you go on to something else. And for reading, for speed reading, so it's a bit more of the same. If we're using our eyes all the time, it's in the same way, like trying to capture the whole paragraph at once without moving the eyes. That's not going to be good for our eyesight in the mid-long term. But if we're combining doing that, because at some point we need to read fast for a limited period of time, and then we go for a walk in nature and we're looking at the birds and we're doing something else, then these different ways of looking and seeing end up compensating, and it's okay. For speed reading, they say that actually looking at the upper part, there's more variation in letters in the upper part, like you have the T's and the L's and the I's with a dot. So it's actually easier to do the recognizing faster with the upper side. So some people, instead of putting the pointer under the line, they will put it above the line. It seems to work better for them. Now, with speed reading, there's also something that's interesting that we can also relate with eyesight in a different way. And that is that we also understand what's in the text through our imagination. And we are not just reading with our eyes, but we're connecting also with the intuitive aspect of it. And also, as we are reading, we're not just paying attention at the shape, but rather at the meaning and the images that the meaning is creating in our mind. Imagination is very linked with eyesight and vision. And so much that, as you know, we have colleagues that see very, 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 very well, perfectly well, or normally well at different distances. And when they measure, because we have a colleague that's actually an optometrist in this case, and if he would measure the shape of his eye, he would still find a refractive error, but he sees very well. So it looks like there's something happening at another level of the consciousness that is not just the anatomy and the physiology of the eye that is allowing for that clarity. And so here we open into other spheres and dimensions of eyesight and seeing and perception that go beyond. But maybe now we're deviating into a different direction.
We have to come to a close on the YouTube live. We have a little extra 15-20-minute chat with our Clear Vision Club tribe. So I put the links to your, first of all, you have a free guide. Share a little bit about your free guide, and then also the link to your reading program. I put that into the YouTube chat so that everybody can do one or the other. I recommend doing one of the. You want to talk quickly a little bit about the 10 tips guide? And
okay, so the 10 tips guide, it really is a short ebook that has a handful of fundamental things that anybody who wants to take care of their eyes and improve their eyesight, well, it's a few things that you can start doing that are useful.
The reading program is kind of a self-study program.
Yes, exactly. Better Vision Through Reading. It's a self-study program in which we do talk about all these different things that I mentioned, like the environment, how you prepare yourself for reading, what's happening when you're reading, how do you handle the pauses, practices that you can do so that you can improve your eyesight for reading. And then reflecting about different kinds of tools that you can use with reading. So it goes more in depth, of course, than the ebook. And then I also have a bigger program. You also know about this, and the bigger program that we release only 3 times a year goes even more in depth and supports people to improve from different eyesight symptoms, and to see better and better.
Awesome. We will put all the links underneath the YouTube. You already have the 10 tips guide. You have the Better Vision Through Reading program, which again is not just for presbyopia. This is a program that works for all vision conditions. I love this program. It's amazing, and I highly recommend it. And you explain everything step by step what we just kind of touched on today. So thank you, YouTube. Thank you so much, Dr. Ainhoa. This was really, really interesting, talking about the whole root causes and all the different levels of, just from the physiology to the emotions to the, how our society and all those things, how we treat elders. I think it's so fascinating. So thank you, YouTube. And thank you, Dr. Ainhoa. And we see you next week. Bye. So Trisha, can you stop the live feed, please?